What's it like to play the Nintendo Entertainment System? Nintendo Entertainment System. Now you're playing with power.
So today's episode is involving NES accessories such as the light gun and then that guy behind me, Rob the Robot. So I hope you guys enjoy these next 5 titles from the NES collection. And it's shocking, but the first game up today is Super Mario Bros. Duck Hunt Kart. This was, again, one of the first games I had in that big box, and yeah, it's a pioneering game. It's one of those games that you have to play and learn based on the level design. And you don't really see that much today. It's just games are filled with tutorials, and they last for forever. Now, as you can see, the level design and the way the game is made, you can't go back on the level. And it's really fun learning all the jumps, because then at the end of each stage, you get to botch it until you get it right, and you get that flag at the very end. I mean, what else really is there to say about Mario that we don't already know? I mean, 1-1's an iconic level, and 1-2 is famous for its music change, going from the happy little overworld to the dark tone of the underworld. I remember as a kid that I was so rubbish at this game that all the jumps and everything it just took time and practice. And then one day a friend came over and says, "Dude, I just found a way to cheat on 1-2 and get to the levels you can't get to," because we weren't good enough. I mean, I was 4 years old when I got this game. So when he showed me this little trick here, that you can just traverse the entire upper part of the level and eventually skip it to warp, holy crap, it blew my mind. And now you see this in many games where you can get shortcuts and maybe glitches, but this was really something new that I'd never seen before. Just the fact that you could skip those beginning levels that you play over and over again to get to these harder levels and worlds and see enemies you weren't familiar with. It was almost like it was a different game, even though it was clearly the same game. And the difficulty curve doesn't get too hard, but it gets just hard enough. I mean, when you get such things as the Star Power and the Fire Flower, you just feel invincible to do anything and just forget about the world and jumps you have to make. Now, there are certain things about the game that people seem to have a problem with, and I myself was one of them when I was small. It ranged from things like enemy flickering whenever there was just like 5 sprites on the screen, but it was mostly Mario's floaty jumping, the fact that he has a bit of momentum to him after he runs, which causes you to miss jumps and fall into pits all the time. But man, it was so satisfying when you finally get the jump mechanics just right and get that top of the flag bonus. But, again, it goes back to the difficulty curve going up, the satisfaction that you feel when you finally do get a hang of this, and the fact that once you get the warps down and some of the jumping, you can beat the game, even though it is probably the hardest Super Mario Bros. To this day. The next game we're going into is freaking Duck Hunt. Now, this is a light gun game, and I do have a few more light gun games, but this is probably the most famous. We're not doing this one duck pansy nonsense, we're doing 2 ducks. Anybody can pretty much just point a gun and get 1 duck at a time, but it's where the 2 ducks come and play where the game actually gets a little bit difficult. You're only given 3 shots, and you have to take down 2. So once you miss twice, you're done. And the game has its charm. I mean, I've been to such things as barcades today here in Toronto, and there's Duck Hunt games, along with Super Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt, what makes Duck Hunt special is it's really a game that anybody can just pick up and play, and all ages. But the worst part is when that dog laughs at you when you get game over, and you will inevitably get game over. The only other option in this game is the clay shooting, which is just pretty much the same thing. I personally don't have that much fun with it. It's all about the 2-duck mode. So, that's all I gotta say about Duck Hunt. It's an iconic game. I would play it. Our next game is another light gun. Gotcha. Now, this only had a North American release in 1987. It was published by LJN, which is quite unfortunate. Luckily, they did not develop it. It was actually developed by Atlas, who later went on to make such games as the Persona series and Shin Megami Tensei. So they eventually became really good. So as long as LJN wasn't involved in the development, it turned out to be alright. So as a light gun game, it's pretty straightforward. It's a capture the flag paintball-esque game in which you traverse 3 levels kind of over and over again, in which the time scale and repetition gets a lot quicker. So the objective is to move the screen left and right with the D-pad plugged into your second controller port, and then you use the light gun to shoot. So it's kind of odd that you gotta hold a controller and the light gun at the same time. But the game, in its simplicity, does still have its charm. But the fact that you only have 3 levels to go through is kind of a disappointment. There is the fun factor and challenge factor where if you're playing with friends, you try and all get that high score. And you have to consider things like running out of ammo, time, missing your targets will have you run out of ammo, but if you have a precise shot, you actually get some bonus points. So the first level was that military thing. The second level here is more of the 80s punk style. And then the third level is kind of a winter military romp. There's not really much else to say. As you can see, it's just get the flag, shoot, move left, right. And then it's just rinse and repeat from there until you eventually get bored or you have some settings with friends. So, it's alright. Coming out in 1989 was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles video game. It was one of the first video games based on TMNT. So it was developed by Konami, but in North America it was published by Ultra Games. I guess that was just a localization kind of thing. So, fun fact, in 1989, this was Game of the Year, and I just hand that out to not many good games came out in 1989, even on the Master System or the just coming out Sega Genesis or Mega Drive. But the fact is, Ninja Turtles, this game is loosely based on the animated series, which was going into its second season at the time, and then it's also loosely based on the comic book series, which is why you kind of have a mixture of the two, which can be confusing to fans. So I didn't know this until later, but the fact is, when I was a little kid and just playing this, the fact that you can be all the turtles and have all their weapons was all I cared about. The other noticeable thing about this is there's no lives. Your lives are essentially the turtles themselves, so you get 4 and then you only get 2 continues. The interesting other fact is you can actually input the Konami code for this game, but instead of lives, you just get 2 extra continues, I believe. So instead of 2, you get 4. So I guess that helps. But the game is extraordinarily difficult. So at the time, Konami was definitely known for these things. The whole trick to the game really is to learn how to exploit each boss with each commanding turtle, which is usually Donatello, because the game is pretty glitchy. Sprites tend to flicker a lot on the screen because the NES just can't handle it very much. So speaking of glitches and exploiting bosses to the commanding turtle, you'll notice right away that you never really want to face a boss head on. You kind of want to develop the strategy of jumping up to higher ledges and then trying to figure out how to properly beat them from there. And you don't want to face them head on because of the fact that you don't have lives with each turtle. It's not until after stage 3 that you can actually start bringing turtles back from being quote-unquote captured, and that's only 1 at a time. So you really end up going back and forth between areas that spawn a pizza at the beginning so you can regenerate your health. Now there are upgrades to your weapon, such as a projectile like this boomerang here, but whenever you pick up one, you get a limited amount, and it only works 1 per turtle. So one trick is to throw a boomerang, and then switch quickly to another turtle and have him catch it. And you will actually have that turtle also have boomerangs. More notably is the difficulty in the water level, which is the second stage. Now, as a kid, I never got past this stage, because I just did not have the patience to remember where all the bombs were, and then the electric seaweed is ridiculous. You can't avoid getting hit at least a couple times. Now, for the sake of this video, I did put in the time and finally get past the second stage. So that was incredibly satisfying after all these years. I mean, I shit on this game all the time for its just outstanding difficulty level. Thank you, Konami. But it is beatable. So I have given it the benefit of the doubt. So once you get past stage 2, you finally get onto our quote-unquote main story in which the Dick Shredder shows up. So maybe I'll go back to this game and finally start actually playing it as an adult. In 1985, with Rob the Robot, was Gyromite, or in Japan known as Robot Gyro. So that's hence why the title screen is different. They just kind of instantly just ported it over here. There's game mode A and B with test, so you can test Rob the Robot, and direct mode where you just use Rob the Robot and not even play the game. So the whole objective is to use the old professor here and get all the bombs in the allotted amount of time. And you have the option to use hook up controller 2 to Rob, which doesn't fucking work, because Rob's a piece of shit. Or you can just use the second controller yourself to inevitably push the blocks down back and forth. In that sense, the game is pretty straightforward. One of the things I used to do was have a friend be the second controller, or I would be the second controller, and you can either play together, or just be total dicks to each other, where you're just trying to avoid dying from the other person all the time. So it brings a little different aspect to the game. So you gotta use your imagination how to make this game truly fun. Because even though the levels are kind of imaginative, and the fact that you can squish your enemies, the game gets pretty boring pretty quick in that sense. It is a nice little puzzle game to have, but the fact that you gotta pretty much have 2 controllers in your hands, because you just can't use Rob. It's just not feasible. He doesn't work correctly, hence why they only made 2 games. This one and Stack Up, for the little figure that comes with it. But hey, you know, it's a nice little piece of history at least, and you can have some sort of fun with it every now and again. So yeah, that's Gyromite. Finally is Blades of Steel, another Konami title, so you can see what company I seem to like as a kid. This came out in 1988, and it was really my first exposure to hockey as a kid, because growing up in Texas, hockey isn't even a thought. It's all football or nothing. So I actually got this game at Funkoland when I traded in my Super Mario Bros. Cartridge, because I already had the Mario Bros. Duck Hunt cartridge. So I thought, hey, I don't need 2 of the same game, I can trade it in and get this game. And this game really looked interesting to me, because at Funkoland they had it on display, and I played it, and I was like, wow, this is hockey. And it's all been history from there. I mean, look at the irony. Now I'm living in a country where hockey is their prime source of sport. So I generally didn't have many friends that wanted to play this. It was mostly Tecmo Basketball or even NES Play Action Football. So this was really just me playing the computer over and over again. The fact is that you can fight the guys, the sprites didn't constantly flicker, and even though the passing is pretty much really hard, the whole mechanics of it is a lot of fun. What makes this essentially kind of interesting is the fact that you're controlling not only the players, but you're also controlling the goalie, hence the arrow. So that kind of makes me reminiscent of soccer, how you shoot the puck or ball at the goal based on the arrow. Now, one thing that didn't really happen very often is this penalty shot aspect. If you get into a fight close enough to the goalie, they actually call a penalty shot, and it is freaking hard as crap to actually block it. You have to time it just right. So it's pretty much an automatic goal. So that kind of deters you from always fighting. But man, do you just always fight. And they have your guy goes to the penalty box, whoever the loser is, and there's even, after the second intermission, a little Gradius minigame. So, yeah, Blades of Steel, a lot of fun. I highly recommend this sports game. So I hope a couple of these little light gun games seemed interesting to you, like Gotcha or Duck Hunt. Duck Hunt's a must-get, and you must play on 2 duck mode. Now, and then you have such amazing titles like Gyromite, which involves Rob the Robot, so I definitely don't recommend that unless you have a friend to play with you, because that is definitely a two-player game. Then you got the gems like Mario and Blades of Steel, which I think are a pinnacle to any NES collection, and they're a lot of fun. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little accessories video of mine.